All right. Well, welcome everybody, and I'm thrilled that this many people showed up to want to learn about the 990 because I find it fascinating, but there's a lot of people that don't. So today's objectives, there'll be educational objectives, so enhance your understanding of the Form 990, its requirements, and the different sections. Um, there'll be strategic objectives around demonstrating how the Form 990 can be used beyond just I have to file it, to enhance your storytelling, the transparency, and also engaging your stakeholders. And then also just the practical, some actionable insights and tips to improve the quality of your Form 990, and how to avoid some common errors. So we're going to start with a quiz. Terry, if you could bring up the first question. So the first question is, what is the main well, actually you can just go, yeah, what is the main purpose of the Form 990? Is it to apply for your nonprofit status, to report executive salaries only, provide the public with financial information about a nonprofit, or to register the nonprofit's name? The second question is, which organizations are not required to fill out the Form 990? And that's charities with gross receipts less than $50,000, all churches, or nonprofits with income exclusively from membership dues. And the third question, what can you typically find in Part 3 of Form 990? The number of volunteers, a list of board members, information on program service accomplishments, or details about fundraising events. And then question 4 is, what statement about Form 990 is false? It must be filed by the 15th of the 5th month after the organization's fiscal year ends. It can be used by donors to evaluate a nonprofit's financial health. The Form 990N, the e-postcard, is for organizations with gross receipts over $200,000. And then D, some parts of Form 990 are open to public inspection. And the last one is, how can the Form 990 benefit a nonprofit organization besides meeting legal requirements? It can help attract potential donors by demonstrating transparency. It can serve as a marketing tool by highlighting the organization's accomplishments. It can be used to assess and improve financial management practices, or D, all of the above. So it looks like
If everybody could just there's actually 4 questions in the quiz.
oh, there's
Yeah, I
5.
oh,
Oh,
there's
that's okay.
5. Okay, I only
There
have
were.
4. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened
It's
to the
all
last
good.
one. I don't know what happened to the last one, my bad. But if everybody would just take a couple minutes and read through these and respond, I'll give you a little bit of time. Your responses are anonymous, if that helps.
That makes you feel better.
Makes me feel better.
All right. I think anybody that's gonna respond has responded, so we'll end the poll. Are you able to project?
Hold on a second. I just saw another answer come through.
Oh, oops. Okay.
Okay, we've got 6 of 7 participants who have responded.
Great.
So that's good. So let's see what we got.
Can we see that? Okay, so first question, what is the main purpose of the Form 990? The correct answer is provide the public with financial information about a nonprofit. It is not to apply for nonprofit status. So it is, as we'll learn, it's a form that you, depending on how much money your organization brings in, you have to file with the IRS regardless, but then it's open to public inspection. And so the public is able to see the financial information about your organization. The second question, what organizations are not required to fill out a Form 990? And charities with gross receipts of less than $50,000 dollars. It's the 990N that charities with less than $50,000 have to fill out. Churches do not have to fill out a Form 990 of all things. But anyway, question number 3, what can you typically find in part 3 of the 990? It is the program service accomplishments. The list of board members comes later, and we'll see that. And then which statement about the Form 990 is false? It is answer C, that the Form 990N is for organizations with gross receipts over $200,000. The 990N is actually for those with less than $50,000 in gross receipts. So y'all did pretty good. Thank you for participating in that. It helps me also understand what our understanding is on the 990. So my next question is if anyone is willing to volunteer, if we have time at the end, I can show you how I quickly go through an organization's 990 to do an evaluation of it. So if you just like share your organization's name and that you're willing to do it, I will pull up your 990 and then live go through how I go through somebody's 990 to get all sorts of information on you. My background, by the way, is actually in nonprofits. I spent more than, we'll say more than 20 years working in nonprofit organizations. And I was actually the CEO of an organization in October of 1999. When a lot of the 990 work was coming out and organizations were required to file, and we suddenly all realized, oh shoot, there is a whole lot of our information that is just going to be out there now, and we need to do a better job of providing this information. So I'm actually going to call them troublemakers at GuideStar, which is also Candid. Those two organizations have moved, but GuideStar worked with the IRS to make digital copies of the Form 990 filings available on the web starting in October of 1999. And it is now your organization's most public document. It doesn't matter if you put out an annual report. It doesn't matter if you've got all sorts of great things on your website or things like that. The 990, anybody has access to it. One, by going to GuideStar, you can get electronic copies there, but also anybody is able to ask you for a copy of your 990, and you are legally obligated to provide it to them if they ask for it. So about 2/3 of visitors to GuideStar look at one or more Forms 990 during their website. If you do not have an account on GuideStar, I'd encourage you to do it. It's free. And like I said, you can find out all sorts of great things about different organizations. And then, as I said, you're required to file it, but it's not just a regulatory tool. It's an opportunity to help people understand your organization better. And foundations are going to it. Your potential donors are going to it. So using the 990 as this tool to help communicate more information about your organization is critically important. So as we go through it today, again, put your questions in the chat box, and Terry will alert me to them as we go along. But I'm literally going to walk through the different sections of the 990. It is, let me pull this up really quickly. So this is the This is the 990. This is straight off of the IRS website. Hasn't been filled out or anything. If you have not ever filled out the 990, don't. Your accountant should be doing it. You should be editing it, but it is the information that's in the 990. It's not the easiest thing to fill out, and a lot of it can be pulled directly from your accounting software or something like that. So let me just walk you through the different sections. So part one is this of the 990 is actually the summary of the organization. So I pulled this from the Florida Community Development Corporation's 990. I just went on to GuideStar. Again, it's a public document, so I apologize. But anyway, so so part one, you want to briefly describe the organization's mission or most significant activities. So a lot of organizations will just put their mission statement, or they might just simply say something that is extremely unhelpful by saying that they do charitable work. This is not what the Florida Community Development Corporation did, by the way. I'll put what they put up there in just a second. So you want to be descriptive here. You want to say what your mission is, but you also want to say what it is that you do, because this is the first thing that people are going to see when they take a look at your 990. So Florida Community Development Corporation said that on theirs, they said to foster, provide, and maintain housing services and social services to very low and moderate income families, individuals and families, and in furtherance thereof, the corporation may carry out specific activities, including without limitation, acquiring real estate, developing and constructing commercial and residential real estate, and delivering ancillary services to support underserved populations. So very quickly, when somebody pulls up the 990, they can see what this organization is doing and what they're about. So again, put your mission statement on there, but also maybe give a little bit more information about what the organization is doing. And don't do something as simple as saying that you just do charitable work. That's not helpful. The rest of the summary talks about the number of voting members of the governing body, the number of independent members of the governing body, the number of employees, the number of volunteers. You don't need to be exact, particularly with the volunteers. You can put in an estimate with regard to that. But this is as of the end of your fiscal year. So if your board might have had 20 people during the entire year, but when you went to file your 990, when at the end of the fiscal year, you only had 15, you only put in 15. It's not the total number that you can have, or it's not the minimum, it's what you had at that time. And then it's got the really brief financial overview for the prior year and then for the current year. So then I'm going to jump to part three, because part two is actually just your signature line, essentially, and who has control of your books. So part three is the statement of program service accomplishments. Here is where you want to describe your accomplishments with the measurements that are on there. Again, this is a public document, so you want to be bragging in this. You want to say what great work that you've done. And you want to talk about what the purpose of that activity is. And then you also you'll see in a second that you have to provide the financial information associated with that particular service accomplishment, but give the statistical information. And if you don't have exact numbers, I mean, putting estimates in there, using the language that helps describe what it is that that you were essentially spending your money on, how you were doing good things in the community. So this is a non-housing related one. I grabbed some different ones that I saw. So to provide drama instruction to and theater arts experience to DFW patrons, provides art opportunities which promote lifelong learning, teamwork, creativity, communications, and good citizenship skills, to provide other DFW nonprofits a space to utilize. So they could have broken those out into, additional ones. They could have provided some actual numbers associated with the total number of nonprofits that were utilizing that space. That would have actually helped communicate a lot, more helpful to whoever happens to be reading it. And then you can see the expenses that are associated with providing that space and instruction. But you also want to make sure that you use correct spelling on your 990 because it is a public document and people like me are going to judge you. Congregate Housing Services Program that provides meals, housekeeping, and personal care services to low-income senior citizens. Again, you can see the expenses associated with it. You can see the revenues associated with it. But what would have been much more helpful is if they actually talked about the number of meals or the number of individuals that they were serving, by this particular program. So think about, again, while I said that you don't want to be the one that's filling it out, whether it's your accounting firm or something like that, they're not going to have this sort of language. And so your organization is the one that has to fill in those pieces, because they'll just put in, some basic information there, but you want to make this document actually come alive for the people that are reading it. So here's a much better example here on the bottom. We served 160,250 home delivered meals in 2014 to 1,215 individuals. I mean, so they're much more descriptive in there. They're giving statistics, they're giving percentages, they've got, the expenses and the revenue on there. So when I read this, I know exactly what their impact was in their community, because it's actually captured right there in their 990. The checklist of required that should say required schedules. I apologize for that. So part 4. The answers to these questions determine which additional schedules you may be required to complete. There is a whole section in there that everyone looks at to see whether or not you're required to fill out Schedule L, which is the transaction with interested purposes. So if you go to the 990, actually, I'll just pull it up here. When I talk about Part 4, checklist of required schedules, you're literally going through and answering yes or no to all of these questions. And so depending on your answers, it may or may not trigger you having to fill out additional schedules. And in this case, I'm highlighting all of the Schedule L's on there. So anything that has to do with interested parties, that's going to raise a red flag, and it might require additional explanation and everything, whether it's on, to help the IRS understand it, to help donors understand it, to help foundations understand it, however it is. But it deals with everything from essentially self-dealing. I mean, so are your board members getting loans from the organization? Are they providing loans to the organization? Is any staff member benefiting from it? Because again, nonprofits are set up. No one person is supposed to financially benefit, from it. So these are the questions that actually deal with Schedule L. Issues around family members, who's related, and things like that are all part of Schedule L. So, but here's how to deal with it, because there's no issue necessarily with actually having those things, but you better have a darn good reason, and always document what you're doing. So in this case, Ann Gaffney, she's the president of the organization, and she has provided a loan to help finance a cookbook. Thank you, Ann, for helping with the cash flow issues that we're going to have with actually putting out this cookbook. You can see the principal amount on there. This is from Schedule O. This is from Schedule L. sorry. So, the original amount was nearly $30,000. The principal due is nearly $17,000. Is it in default? Yes or no? Did the board approve it? There should be a big old yes right here. The fact that there is a no, the board should be approving any sort of loans in this case. So that's problematic. And then is there a written agreement? Yes or no? And again, the answer there should be yes. They're answering honestly, but that just helps to make sure that there is no funny business. That helps tell the community, it helps tell your donors, it helps tell foundations that there's no funny business going on there with regard to self-dealing on the part of the board.
Excuse
so in
me,
this case,
Patrick.
yeah, Terry.
I'm sorry, Patrick. We do have a question. This is we have a doing business as that we operate under. Can the 990 be filed as as the doing business as, or does it have to be under the name of the original organization?
So on the 990, I'll pull it right back up. So there is a line, the name of the organization. So you want to put the legal name of the organization, and then you put the DBA underneath it. So on this line right here. So yes, you need to file as whatever your legal name is, and you can put in the DBA. And so if you go to GuideStar, your organization can be found either way, either as the DBA or as your legal name.
And Patrick, another question: when is Schedule O required?
I'll get to that, but I will tell you right now, Schedule O is always required. Was that a trick question, Terry?
It just showed up in the chat. I'm just telling you what I got in there.
Schedule O is always required, but Schedule O is great. I mean, it's a blank page for you to be able to put whatever on there. We'll talk about Schedule O in a second. But because of the way that several questions are worded on the 990 that like triggers Schedule O, there is you'll see there is one question that essentially it's almost like a trick question that the IRS puts in there, where it's like you can't answer it without like triggering Schedule O. You have to do it. This is another example regarding a loan. We've got the president and CEO. He's getting a loan from the organization. You can see the original amount. Is it in default? Was it approved by the board? And, is there a written agreement? I have no idea why they're loaning $223,000 to him, but that would cause me to ask additional questions, there. But, it has to be disclosed. And then if anybody is like living on site, if their job requires them to actually be on site, these are also the sorts of things that have to get disclosed as part of Schedule L. So in this case, they're renting property from the organization. There will eventually be the question as to whether or not it's at market rate or not, and whether or not that then triggers the individual having to pay some additional taxes or things like that as a result of it. So part 5, statement regarding other IRS filings and tax compliance. So this is around you asking other people for money. So as a nonprofit organization, of course you're asking other people for money. And if you have gross receipts greater than $100,000, and did you ask anybody for funds that, well, think about galas. So all donations to galas are not 100% tax deductible because they're getting something in return for that. They're getting a meal, or those sorts of things. So if you're doing those sorts of things where it's a gala or some other sort of event or something like that where somebody is getting something in return, you actually have to provide them with documentation that says so much of your gift is tax deductible, or this is the amount that is not tax deductible. So that's just what that question is asking.
Patrick, I'd like to just point out there that this is something that we have to do. When we receive a grant, for example, for our summit, to sponsor the summit, so in return, they're getting advertising in the program, they're getting exhibit space, they're getting a number of complimentary registrations which have a dollar value attached to them. So that's how that works at this end of it also.
Yeah.
You
So
just have to keep track of that, and all your funders want that information.
They do. So best to think those things through and just automatically provide it in your letters or something like that, for that case. The one I'm going to say out on this, and again, I come from a cultural organization standpoint, so we have memberships and things like that, and I don't think any of y'all are in this situation, but you'll see that like the lowest, usually the entry point for memberships is around $75. That's because up until $75, you don't have to provide the person with any sort of receipt that says whether or not they got goods or services for it. So like if you're a member of a museum and you get the family membership at $75 and part of that gives you free parking, whereas normally parking is like $10 every single time you go into it, they don't have to tell you, they don't have to give you that receipt. Your full $75 is tax deductible. Once they go up to the $150 level, though, the organization then has to enumerate, oh, we're assuming that you're parking 3 times and you're getting all of these things, and this is the dollar value associated with it. So this is just the end run as part of the 990 on part of it. So that was a lot of information for the first part. So we're going to take a literally 2-minute break because I think I have just as many slides on the back end that I need to get through. So if we can be back at what, 3:36, Terry?
Have 3:36.
All right. Get up, stretch your legs, grab a drink. I know I want one. No.
Put questions in the chat or raise your hand.
Did anybody volunteer for me to go through their 990?
I'm not seeing anything.
It's fine. I don't know that we'll have time.
Would be kind of fun though.
It might make people sick because I literally like go up and down between things.
Oh, we're gonna end up with motion sickness.
Yeah.
Because you're jumping all around.
First thing I do is I look at the executive salary.
Yeah, I can see that.
See how grossly underpaid the person is being in charge is being paid.
I'd say that's pretty standard across the field that everyone is grossly underpaid.
It is.
I keep seeing stuff, because we're looking at different job things going on, and I keep seeing that people are only asking now that people work a 35-hour week, a 30 to a 35-hour week rather than a 40-hour week.
Is that to keep them?
It's because they
benefits?
because they can't do the pay raise. So they're reducing the number of hours required.
It's a mistake.
Telling you what, it's not cheap to be charitable.
No, it's not. Yeah, that's part of the challenge. I think I told you before, I did not realize how much of a capitalist I was until I went over to the dark side of consulting.
Yeah.
But I was already pushing all of my organizations, in terms of this anyway. But then like when I got on the other side and I was just like, I can't believe that I actually embrace all of these things that I was railing against as the CEO of a nonprofit.
That's all right. You are forgiven, Patrick.
Thank you.
I've got 337, which is a little bit over, but who knows? So,
All right.
but
I don't see cameras on though, so
you don't see
there.
cameras
Frank's
on
back.
this.
Thanks,
Okay.
Frank. And here comes Shante.
Shante, all
Yay!
right. All right.
All right.
Well, hopefully they left
And
their
I know
volume
that
on.
this is whirlwind, but this is higher level, kinds of things. But it's also helping you to understand like what should be looking for um, with your own documents, but also as you're looking at other people's documents. So part 6 is around the governing body and management, the policies, and then various disclosures. So we have the number of voting members of the governing body at the end of the tax year. So that's what I was telling you before. And again, it's reflected up above. So these two numbers should match. And here's where we start seeing well, actually, we saw Schedule O several times before, but this is where you would have seen Schedule O if I went through it line by line. But if there are material differences in the voting rights among members of the governing body, or if the governing body delegated broad authority to an executive committee or similar committee, you need to explain it in Schedule O. Like I said, Schedule O is literally going to be what amounts to this blank sheet of paper where you are explaining yourself when you answer, in various ways on the 990s. So if your board of legally, your board of directors are the ones that are legally responsible for the organization. But if your bylaws say that the executive committee gets to do everything and that the board is really just rubber stamp everything that the executive committee does, that's what that question is asking about. And so you need to say, that's what our bylaws say. The number of voting members, and then asking about family relationships or business relationships here as well. So if it is the case where your organization was founded by a family and all of the members are family members, if you answer yes there, you need to go into Schedule O and explain who has relationships with what, and things like that. So in general, your board members should not be compensated. That's it's really only private foundations. It's really only foundations where you will see board members being compensated. Foundations really don't like to see board members being paid for their work. And so that's going to make your life difficult if your board is being compensated, besides like being reimbursed or things like that, but that's not going to show up here. If the family dealings and everything else, that's where you're needing to fill out Schedule O.
Patrick, I think I've got a question related to this. If a board member is related to any key employee, should this be noted?
Yes. Yeah, because you've got the key employee and the family relationship. Officer, director, trustee, or key employee have a business relationship with any other. So yes, it should be disclosed there and what that is. And not that you're not allowed to do it, but you need to be able to explain why that is the case.
Okay, I have another question here. Can you unpack 8B? Each committee with authority to act on behalf of the governing body. That was a previous slide.
Hmm.
Maybe it was
So,
70.
well, so in general, the board is the ultimate decision maker for the organization. So if the board ever takes action to delegate any of their responsibility, so whether it's to another committee or actually to a management organization or something like that, I've seen that done before. You need to say why that is, because again, the board is the one that's supposed to be ultimately responsible for the organization. I mean, if there's a specific instance, I can talk through why that is, if I know what that's about.
Whoever question that was, did you want to ask for additional clarification there? Because I have another one.
Yeah, I submitted the question. So the way I read it is each committee with authority to act on behalf of the governing body. So we have a board of directors, and then we have several committees.
Right.
Does that mean that each of those committees, the question is, I assume that's being posed is whether or not each of those committees has the authority to make decisions on behalf of the organization. Exactly what that means. Is that what that means? So they can make a decision that the rest of the board has to follow, or does that decision go to the board that the board then votes on? So that was the gist of my question.
Yeah. So if you have a investment committee, let's say that you have an endowment or something like that, and they're really making recommendations to the board with regard to what investments, how much, what movement, whatever that happens to be. Now, the board could say you're able to operate within these parameters for that committee, and that's not necessarily delegating them power. That's putting barriers up so that they don't operate outside of that. If the board says to the investment committee, y'all do whatever you want, that's delegating authority that they should not have. In bylaws, you'll see where like the executive committee can take action on behalf of the board between meetings, but ideally the additional language should be, that whatever those decisions are ultimately approved by the board in the end, so that the board is retaining its ownership as it is of the organization. So the board can delegate all it wants to committees in terms of like getting the work done of the board, but it should all ultimately come up to the board in terms of, approvals for actual actions or things like that being taken.
Patrick, I've got a few more questions in chat, but I'm going to sit on them until we get closer to the end so you can get through the presentation, if that's okay with everybody.
Sure. This is part of the disclosures, section. So, did the organization become aware during the year of significant diversion of the organization's assets? So this is, my slides got out of order. Oh no, here it is. Okay. So this is the various parts of Schedule O. We talked about Schedule O, the supplement. So material diversion of assets. So you're going to have to put it in there, and then you've got the review process and things like that in there. So so as part of Schedule O, you also need to describe whether or not you have to. So this is actually the question that is in there. It says, whether or not the governing body reviewed the 990. Well, you want to say yes. And if you say no, that's problematic. So you answer yes, and then you have to describe how they reviewed it. So it just simply says that it was reviewed by the executive committee and the board in that case. The compensation for the CEO, again, one of the policies that is required is that the compensation is supposed to be determined by the board for the CEO, and that you describe in Schedule O what that process is to determine what the salary is for the CEO, for the executive director. So that's the reason why so many people run to GuideStar and to the 990s, because above a particular pay level, your executive director's salary is now public information. And so organizations will readily run there and actually then use that description in Schedule O in terms of saying that that's what they did. They did comps by actually looking at other similar organizations' 990s. And then you need to describe how the organization makes its documents publicly available in Schedule O. So you say that the governing documents, policies, and financial statements are available to the public upon request, including the 990. So this is all Schedule O sorts of information that it gets triggered above, and if you're answering no to any of these things, that causes other problems for you. So my slides got out of order. So in terms of the diversion of funds, that's one of the things that you would need to describe in Schedule O. So something that is not material is if you're running a thrift store or something like that, and one of your employees was taking money out of the till. It's not a dollar amount that's large enough that you need to describe it. Whereas if you discovered that an officer had been embezzling from the organization and that it was almost $18,000, and so you need to disclose that it was a significant dollar amount and what you did as a result of it. So that's just one of those things that it's like you don't want to hide it, because you get in more trouble if you try and hide it or cover it up. People are going to find out about it. They know that there was a problem. They've seen it in the newspaper, and then they go to your 990 and they don't see it. That's going to cause all sorts of questions, with regard to how truthful your organization is. On the policy section of this, this section B, it asks you about policies that are not required by the IRS. However, just because the IRS doesn't want these policies does not mean that you shouldn't have them. So, like I said, it asks about you providing a complete copy of the 990 to the board before filing. It doesn't say that the board has to approve it, but they should see it before you actually file it, and being able to say yes, they at least saw it. You want to be able to check that box. Do you have a written conflict of interest, whistleblower, document retention and destruction policy? Again, you want to be able to check that box as yes. If you check no, it causes some questions and everything in some foundation's mind. And then it asks with regard to best practices of setting employee compensation. So in particular with regard to your CEO. So I apologize for my slides getting out of order there. But all of those you're going to then describe in Schedule O what those are. So this is the question. This is the one that is essentially going to require you to fill out Schedule O. It's not whether or not you did provide it, because it's not one of the check boxes. It actually says describe in Schedule O whether, and if so, how, the organization made its governing documents, conflict of interest policy, and financial statements available to the public during the tax year. This forces you to fill out Schedule O. So if nothing else, I should be seeing Schedule O in every single one of the 990s out there, because this is not a checkbox. This is, you have to tell me whether or not you did, and if you did, then how you did it. everyone has to fill out Schedule O. I don't know why they don't do it otherwise, but like I said, it's essentially a blank sheet of paper there. The compensation piece. This is the compensation section, on the 990. So I see here that I've got a board member who is a lecturer, which means that they are a subcontractor for the organization. So I'm already seeing like some problematic things where board members are actually contractors for the organization. So I'm going to want to see why that is or things like that. Same thing with the conductor of this performing arts organization also being a board member and being compensated for that. But then you've got the executive director and the managing director both reporting nothing on their W-2 or 1099, 1099s there. So it's like, why are board members getting compensated when the executive director isn't?
Patrick, this might be a good time for this question. The question was asked, what if the executive director is also serves as a board member?
So is it it would depend on if it's an ex officio board member, so just in name only, and they're not an ex officio non-voting member. You still have to report the compensation if it's above a particular dollar amount. I would say that that's just an issue with regard to good governance, because the executive director inherently has a conflict of interest with almost everything that comes before the board. And so if you should have a conflict of interest policy. And if the executive director somehow is able to say that they don't have a conflict of interest with any number of the things that are coming up for the board, I'm not sure how they have that how they're able to do that in a voting capacity. And not have that conflict of interest, but I'm open to that conversation. But yeah, I mean, they need to report that. And again, with regard to the various checkoffs here, it's is a director, is a trustee, is an officer, is a key employee. So like in my case, I was an officer, but I wasn't actually a board member for one of them. So I was a non-voting officer and a key employee, but that was because of something special with the organization. And then former here. So if you have somebody that leaves the board during that year, you need to put them on there also. Or if your executive director leaves during the year, you need to check off that former piece with it. They asked the question of the total number of hours worked. You'll often see for the board members, it might just be like 1 hour a week, being listed on there. You'll see others where people are trying to be really very specific with regard to it. It's not that, I don't see why it's necessarily that consequential, other than if you're being compensated for those hours. So if you see an executive director that's making, as I saw recently, $150,000, and they were only working 20 hours a week. It was a part-time, CEO. I couldn't figure out why they were making more than their other key employees that were working 40 hours a week. So it just causes questions to be asked on some of that.
Patrick, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, was there a question?
I have a question, and I don't think that there's a hand raising function on this like there is on Teams.
Okay, go ahead, Frank.
My question is, so Patrick, this section here, the number of board members here may not necessarily reflect the number in the previous two sections, because some of these board members may have resigned during the year. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
You want to list everybody that served during the year, but the number that you're reporting up above is the number that were in place at the end of the year.
Understood. Thank you.
So Patrick, I see that we're down to 4 minutes.
We are.
Yeah. So
I'll get through it.
So, well, because I still have a couple of questions that we haven't gotten
Okay.
to. So I would like to ask folks, you're going to get the presentation. Do you want to
Mhm.
spend these last few minutes answering the questions that we've got? And then if you've got
I'm happy
additional
to do that.
questions.
Yeah, I
if you've
mean, the
got
rest of it is really just going through, use Schedule O. The rest of it is your financials, and just making the point that in my previous conversation I had talked about, doing functional expenses as part, breaking out your P&L by your functional expenses, because you have to report it that way on your 990 anyway. So you may as well like make those two things line up and make your life easier that way. So boom, I got through 6 slides that fast.
Okay. So I'll tell you what, we've got a couple of other questions that I think are pretty interesting. So briefly, the difference between a 990 and an audit, because they are not the same things.
They are not the same thing, and they serve different purposes. So I apologize. I don't know what the state of Florida says about when you have to do an audit. And it's up to the individual states with regard to requirements around audits. And it's usually there's a particular dollar amount in terms of contributions and things like that. And it varies from state to state. And it may just be best practices for you to get an audit done on a regular basis. So that's essentially having an auditor come in and say that you are keeping your books in keeping with the best accounting, the standard accounting practices that are out there. That's all an audit does, and also to record, your financials as of that point in time. The 990 is a legally required document. It's a tax document. It's your nonprofit's tax document. Even though you're a nonprofit, you're still required to file the 990. So that's the difference between it. Your audit is not. You're not legally required to give people your audit. You are legally required to give people your 990.
And I don't know what the threshold is for Florida
Yeah.
either. But even though the Alliance itself is a fairly small organization under $200,000 a year, we have an annual audit, because we have several funders who don't ask for the 990 because they're going to get it anyway, but they do ask us for an audit.
Yep.
So another question is, where in all of this do you locate information about cash reserves, or the reserves that an organization has on hand?
That's let me pull this up. So you have total assets and total liabilities. So you're going to find it right here, and then you'll also find it in the other financial documents there as well, down below as well.
Now another one. Hold on. Excellent information, but maybe we need 2 sessions for this. I think you may be right. Before we are out of time, and I do appreciate everybody's attention, but I would like you to give me one more minute, because we have a quick survey that I would like you to take, just to see how you enjoyed the session. So it is up. If you would just give me, a minute. These are real simple questions. How satisfied were you? And any additional comments, shoot me an email. And again, we will be sending a recording of this out after the fact. And maybe we should consider doing something like this at the summit, which is coming up. Oh yes, I should tell you, the summit is September 29th through October 2nd, and we're going to be in Riviera Beach. So you're all going to want to come to that one. But this could be a really good session there. Okay,
And
I think
please feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to answer any questions that you might have. So.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for completing the poll.
Thanks. This was fun. I know that it was a lot of information, but if nothing else, I hope that it sparked your interest in going back and taking a look at your own 990 and seeing how you can make it better.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've already decided that I'm not reviewing mine anywhere near closely enough because I can't remember the last time I rewrote any of those descriptive sections.
Yep.
All right, well, everybody, thank you so much.
All right.
And we'll see you next time.